Because to accept you being the temple of the Lord, and when you get to know about being the temple of the Lord, you are going to strive harder, to work hard to be holy. Isn't it? Secondly, you're going to strive harder to be responsible. Because to be holy, you must be responsible. Isn't it? Holiness does not come without responsibility. There must be responsibility, because you'll be responsible to say no. If you have a boyfriend, you'll say no this time. Guy, no giving you. Giving you no. Then you have spent a week, not so? You'll also tell your lady, babe, no, this time, away. The Lord is good. Even if you have visited away, the Lord is good. Even if you have visited a couple of times, it's fine. Amen? But the fact is, you resemble God. That is the sacredness we talk about. That's why everyone must treat you greatness. We talk about. That's why everyone must treat you with a lot of care, a lot of concern. If you have a girlfriend, if you go there and you are a lady and you ignore her, you say, you're welcome, and you don't mind, a man will channel the mind. Men, am I deceiving? No. Men, these things of coming, babe, what? You see, touch my feet. That you need them. I want to touch your cheeks. I want to touch your beard. I want to touch your back. Men are not in those things. They are hustlers already. But what a man wants, he wants you to treat him lovingly, specially, and he sees that you are really doing it. Yes? Yes. If you came and knelt down for your husband, then he would feel, yes. Hey, darling, and you go away and you don't show the attention. Then for men, the psychology of men is very tricky. They are wood everywhere, anyhow, in any way. Amen? You can't call a human being a pig. Amen. Amen. Have you ever seen a human go in your philosophy of a being? And that is what we call sacredness. And that sacredness, dear brothers and sisters, is the one I am hinging on, that I am the temple of the Lord. The Lord lives in me. He's in me. He's me. He's in me. You can't go and say, I have met Jesus somewhere. No. None of you has ever met him in the village, in your village, or your town, or your city. None. Amen. The Lord is good. So this calls us to recognize ourselves as those real people of God. People of God, the temple of the Lord, the house of the Lord. In other words, as I zero down, you are the first building, the church. To worship, you are God's stewardship. You have understood those points? Each one of us, God telling us that we are the temple of the Lord. In St. Paul telling us that he's confirming what I told you in the book of Genesis chapter 1. An image of God exactly means that I am actually a living God. Amen? Amen. So when you get to know that, then you are going to see how you become a church. You don't meet the church somewhere like you have come here. The church begins with you. You are the first church. Amen. And this first church ought to live holy, ought to be responsible, ought to be better. When you are better, then you learn some of the things are too many that I will not teach them to you. This church, where are you, my church? I want to explain to you. So, as the community of believers, the church, the community of believers, The church is the assembly. The assembly. An ecclesia. Amen. Ecclesia. 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 You call it ecclesia. Ecclesia kwa ya Katolika. The Catholic Church. Amen. But you remember, I have begun telling you, the church is chapter 1. From verse 1 to, I think, 10, sense of the word. Yeshua, Jesus. The word is Jesus. Amen. And you remember in the Old Testament, in the beginning, the first book, where you are saying, in the beginning, when God was created, Bereshit bara, when God was creating. And meaning that when God was creating, he was not alone. Isn't it? He again goes and says, let us create man in our own image. That statement is plural also. You know my English is not so proper, but that's plural. Amen? Let us. It means the one who starts to create, it was a certain group of people to discuss about our being. Who is walking like... That's why they call you Catholics. Christ-like. Our Christ. Our Christ. Have you understood? Christ-like. You are like Christ. That's why they call you Catholic. Amen? So, this church becomes an ecclesia. Becomes a ecclesia. That's what we call the Ecclesia Catholic, the Church Catholic. And this church, I've told you, it's a building. It's not just the building we come into, but the building you. You are the one God builds on. And when this church comes, as an individual, it becomes an assembly. When it becomes an assembly, we call it ecclesia. Amen? Ecclesia, which is Christ-like, which is Catholic. Amen? So if this ecclesia becomes Catholic, Christ-like, then we are going to live the line of this. Peter told him, man, I bless you. And then he touched him. He blesses him. He says, on your rock, my church. When you read from the Greek word, you Google them, these things. I am only teaching you this to know. From the Greek word, ecclesia, it is an old word of the church, which means a called out assembly. Amen? It has two words, the prefix and the word. The ek, which means called out. Then assembly, rather ecclesia, which means assembly. Amen? So this means me and you are the church after God's heart, created in his own image, living under the stewardship of Jesus Christ. Amen? And this church must be apostolic. What is this church? One, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. Have you picked something? This church we are talking about is one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. And I've explained to you about holiness, which brings out the sacredness of a human being belonging to God. Amen? And this Catholic under the stewardship of Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ himself comes out and confirms it by saying, I bless you, Peter. On your rock, my church will be established. It will grow and reach the ends of the world. Today, Peter is the one who was supposed to be Jesus, because Jesus was both divine and was both God and human. He should have stayed on earth to come and preach to you. Amen? But the duties of God, or the plan of God, was to save us. I'm the child of God. When I am talking about Jesus and talking about the church, I feel like standing in air and then talk. Because I feel like I should step on your head and these things enter your head. You understand how important you are to God. That's where all of you, I said, you are a tabernacle. Rather, you are a temple. And this temple, when you get to know the value, the glory of God in you, then you turn into a tabernacle. A tabernacle, I can explain it literally. A box where we keep Jesus, where Jesus stays. Amen? To this, you are a real tabernacle. I have taught you that God is in you. Amen? Amen. And when we come at Mass, priests call God and his family from heaven. They come and visit us in the Eucharist. Here, at the altar, they come.